If you like the idea of sketching or doodling a simple subject, but that blank page is just a bit too intimidating, you're going to want to try this. You see, you actually don't have to start with a blank page if you don't want to. There are so many ways to approach your initial sketch. You just have to find the one that works for you. And you may even find that different approaches work for different subjects. Now, if that blank page is a problem, let's start by splashing in some joyful colour. It's one of my favourite things to do. And don't discount a little exercise like this. It might seem silly, but you're actually going to get a fair bit out of it. You can see what I'm doing is choosing any colour I feel called to in the moment and putting a blob of it on my page. While I'm doing that, I'm having a chance to get used to the shapes that my brush will make when I place it on the page and the different ways I can turn it. I'm also seeing what colours I like, and I'm dropping in extra colours, wet into wet, so I can enjoy watching the colours spread into one another and create lovely fun effects. Now, you don't have to do any of those things. You can keep just simple blobs if you like. And I'm also kind of trying to think of doing sort of jelly bean shapes or little egg shapes, something like that, because I have a plan of what I'm going to do with these shapes, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But for now, let's just blob in a whole lot of colour and enjoy that part of the process. My plan here is to take advantage of a phenomenon called pareidolia, and this is just that normal human tendency to see faces in clouds or animals in rock formations or even a grumpy face in your electrical outlet. The human brain is really just wired to recognize patterns, so this is something we're really quite good at. And actually, if you're a painter, pareidolia is not just a weird quirk, it's actually a superpower. It means we can take something like this blob and use it as a jumping off point to create something. Now, I have in mind to paint some birds because if Jane Austen will forgive me, I'd like to declare that it is a truth universally acknowledged that pretty much any shape starts to look like a bird once you give it an eye and a beak. So while I started off with jelly beans and blobs and egg shapes and things like that, I'm now thinking a little bit more of birds. So I'm adding a little flick because that might be a tail perhaps. And I enjoy doing that flick, so I'm going to put 2 on the next shape I make, and those might turn out to be wings. We'll just have to see, because now we're going to let that dry completely so that we can come back with a pen and see what we can find in these shapes. Okay, I'm feeling a bit inspired by these birds now, and I'm actually painting a series of birds at the moment. Particular birds, they're actually chickens. That's what our current series of the month is in the Happy Painters Hub, which is my painting membership. I'll put links in the description if you want to find out more about that. But it means that I've got chickens on the brain. So I'm thinking that I'm going to take my shape approach and be a little bit more intentional with the shapes and see if I can just put in a silhouette of the chicken that I want to paint in colour. I'm not going to stick to the colours that I see in reference photos, but I'm kind of thinking chickeny colours and adding a little bit more zing, so brighter oranges and a little bit of purple because I can't personally resist purple. But I'm really going to be a little bit more careful about trying to make the silhouette shape. That really doesn't mean that I've got to get it accurate at all. What we're really doing here is giving ourselves a starting point. So it's a bit like if we were trying to make a sculpture. We would start with a lump of clay and then we kind of start shaping it into something roughly the shape of what we're working towards. There's going to be nothing close to perfection at this point. We're just getting something roundabout in the right place. And I find that this is going to give us a really helpful starting point when we come back with a pen and try and do a little bit of drawing. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to keep filling in a whole lot of chicken silhouette sort of shapes using the colors that I fancy and whatever brush I'm enjoying using. And then I'm going to let them dry completely. Now you do want to make sure that these shapes that we've put down are completely dry, because you're going to probably ruin your pen and scrape up a bit of the paper if you're trying to draw on top of the wet paint still. Let's have a look at the blob shapes that we made for these sweet little birds. Well, they're not sweet little birds yet, but that's what we want to find in the shapes. Of course, you can choose any drawing tool you fancy. I'm going for a waterproof black pen, and I've chosen quite a fine one. I'm wondering if I should have gone with something a little bit thicker, but I quite enjoy the fine lines of my regular old drawing pen. This is just a Mitsubishi Uniball pen that came straight out of the office supply store. So it's really nothing fancy, but it is a waterproof pen. Actually, not that that matters, because we've already done our painting, so you could actually use any pen you fancy. And it's a chance to get out your glitter pens. You could use an acrylic pen. You could even use colored pencils, whatever you fancy. And sometimes you've got to stare at the shapes a little bit if nothing is coming to you straight away. It's a bit like that game, you know, when you stare at the clouds and see what you can find. It takes a while for your eye to kind of get tuned in and your brain to start thinking of bird shapes and matching them up with the blobs that are in front of you. But you really don't have to stick to whatever shape is down on the page. I've chosen to give this first little blue bird a tail. I just felt like I wanted to add a tail, so I'm not worried at all that there isn't any colour in that section. The blue blob was just there to take away the scariness of the blank page and to give me a basic starting point. So I'm adding my little beak, my eye, some little legs, and that lovely tail. I do tend to end up being quite whimsical and doodly with these little birds. I find myself wanting to add little hairs on the top of their head and maybe little bows and that sort of thing. And really, you know, the sky's the limit here. We're really just having a bit of fun, creating some fun little doodle. Equally, you could actually take this exercise and make a bit more of a realistic bird. And again, I'm just letting the shapes tell me what to do. For some of them, I can see a bird that's facing away from us that is reasonably realistic. But some of them, like this little one, I decided to give it a little singing beak and give it a little sleeping eye, a little closed eye, by putting a curve. So, you know, that obviously gives it a very whimsical, doodly feel and takes it much further away from any sort of realism. But it's entirely up to you how much of a mark you want to make here. All you're doing is building a little bit of trust in yourself that you can actually see the shapes that you want to use to turn your blob into something a bit more recognizable. And of course, it's just a really fun way to fill a page with color and sketching. It's a great thing to do in your sketchbook. So those little birds I'm doing entirely from my imagination. But remember those chicken blobs? Those I was basing on reference photos. So I've got something to kind of work towards. So let's see what I can make of those. The first one I want to do is actually the last one that I painted. And this is this chicken that is bending down, eating some corn. And I'm having a look at the marks that my brush left and deciding what additional pen marks I want to add. In some cases, you might not want to add much at all. You might just be happy to add a beak, a wattle and comb, and some legs and be done with it. But you could also go ahead and give it an outline. I prefer not to do a solid outline. It's really just a style thing. If you fancy that little bit more cartoony style, then of course, go right ahead. But I've been enjoying putting in the outline of the bird in sort of a broken line, little sections, because one of the things I've noticed in drawing these chickens this month is that they are probably a lot more angular than we might think of. I think I tend to think of birds as being kind of fluffy, cute, round things, a bit more like the doodly ones that I was making. But actually, chickens are are probably made up of more triangles than any other sort of curved shape. So I think striking in the edge with little bits of broken lines as you see the angles changing on their outline is quite an effective way to do it. But we've got a whole page to play with, so it's a great chance to experiment with the different approaches that you might want to use. Now, one of the things I've been particularly enjoying painting and drawing is these rooster tails. I do love the flourish of those tail feathers, and they're particularly effective to do with a brush, but I'm having just as much fun with my pen here. And I'm really not worried at all about how my original painted shape matches with my line drawings. I'm just going to put in some expressive lines to kind of suggest the tail. And when it comes to expressive lines, I think one of the most important things to be noticing on these chickens is the angle of those legs. I kept finding a tendency to put two little sticks straight down, but actually you can give the bird so much more character and capture his little stance so much better if you can pay attention to the angles of each of those legs. Now, the photo I've got isn't really showing me his feet, and the feet flat on the floor, they're the part of the chicken that frightens me the most, I think. So they're hidden in the grass, and I'm quite happy with that. So I'm just going to put in pen marks to suggest the grass. Because again, this is a way of gently easing ourselves into sketching a particular subject, in this case, the chicken. So we want to make it as approachable as we can. So if you want to add grass instead of drawing the feet, go right ahead. It's not cheating. You just create the chicken just the way you want to. One of the most recognizable parts of the chicken is that wattle and comb. So I find that once you've put in the wattle and comb and the beak, it's usually instantly screaming chicken. Sometimes you'll find that where you dropped in the extra color, it's sitting in just the right place. And sometimes that's luck, and sometimes it was that you were really paying attention to the photo when you dropped in the color shapes. But in this particular chicken, the darker purple marks are nicely showing where that wing is. So I'm using that as a line that I can just give a little bit more weight to with my pen. The head and tail are not really in the right place, so I'm just going to make my lines wherever I think they should be and disregard where the edges of that shape actually are. I do find that this is not just a really fun way to spend half an hour or an hour or so. It's also really useful to have been able to draw 6 little chickens all in different poses and start to feel so much more comfortable with their anatomy and the particular features that you want to concentrate on when you're painting them, because often that's what I'm doing when I'm playing around in my sketchbook or doing a little simple project like this. I'm always thinking about how I would do a full painting in watercolor of this particular subject. So it's valuable in so many ways. I really do hope you give this little project a go, and if you do, please try and remember not to overthink it. Just let your paint dry, grab a pen, and then start looking. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer. We will all see slightly different shapes in the blobs, and whether you're painting from imagination or painting towards a reference photo, free yourself from any preconceived ideas of how it needs to turn out and just see what you can make of what is on the page, because it's a really fun thing to do. It really is creativity in action, that every mark that's on the page is going to be something for you to respond to when you make the next mark. It becomes like something of a game, and it's really freeing to be able to begin not with a blank canvas or any pressure to draw perfectly. It's so fun to start with something spontaneous and then let your imagination take over. We've just used the paint as a jumping off point, a starting point. But I wonder if you're thinking maybe we could have done a bit more with the paint. We absolutely could. It's another variation on this little project. We certainly can let the paint and the brush do more of the work. In fact, I made a separate tutorial all about that. It's a great way to get to know your brush and to know what it can do. So if you want to have a go at painting chickens like this without having to use the pen at all and just learning to make the most of your brush, the video that's up on the screen now is the one you'll want to watch next. Happy painting!